first I'd like to start off by just saying that this is not a thing to replace your whole lawn. There's still a need to have lawn in your yard, especially if you have grandkids or kids, pets too. So lawns have their place. This is more of a trend that's happening again where you see a lot more in Europe. If you lived in Toronto, you probably get in trouble for doing what we're suggesting now because of the bylaws and that. We did check the City of Kamloops bylaws, and there's nothing in there that says you can't have what we're proposing to do as of yet. And then it's going to take some use to from your neighbors, because everybody gets so, especially if you lived in some of the like near the golf courses and that, it's a whole change of mentality, really, to be honest, to go from that monoculture of grass, all perfectly manicured, no lawn or no weeds, nothing like that. So a lot of your neighbors, even in the days of just dandelions, you know, your neighbor would give you that evil eye of, oh, there's, you got dandelions and they're blowing over into my yard and I have no dandelions. So there's a whole shift that has to happen. So we'll start off with baby steps of how you can do it. I'm not proposing you rip everything out. The reason you may want to go to, and even just starting off with clover is probably the easiest one. You know, even 10 years ago, we carried clover killer, right? Just to kill the clover out of your lawn. And now that whole shift has changed that now we're recommending for certain areas that you put in clover. So it can be as simple as this, that in your lawn, if you have clover, just leave it. And clover is really, really probably one of the main ones that has really come to the forefront for Kamloops area anyways, because it's drought tolerant. It makes its own nodes on the roots. I don't know if you've ever pulled out of clover, and you'll see all these nodules on the roots. And those nodules are actually nitrogen fixing nodules. So that's why it's always green. Even on the hottest, driest part of the bank, you'll see your clover green. As well, it gets flowers. So, and it's earlier, so the bees are there as well. So it's funny, I find it very ironic that we go from killing the clover to now recommending, and people are buying seed that we hardly can keep in. But it has its place. So like in the lawn, I would start with that. It's very, very, very good for really steep banks. So in a lot of the areas of Kamloops that we're keep going up higher up on the hills, lots of people are asking us, what do we do with that really steep bank that's eroding? And clover is by far one of the easiest ones to do. It mats onto the hillside. There again, it's always nice and green and has flowers. You can't beat it. So once it's established, and everything I will mention, once it's established, then the amount of watering you're going to have to do is very minimal. So why would we go and do this change? First of all, it is biodiversity. Okay, and if you've been to some of my other seminars, almost all the bad bugs that you have are in your lawn. And then when you're mowing your lawn, what happens is they go up into your fruit tree, or they go over into your flower bed, or into your vegetable garden. So biodiversity will give you the opportunity to have beneficial insects attacking those insects that aren't beneficial for you. Okay, and to do that though, you need to have a mix of flowers, flowering at different times, and producing a situation where they can build up their numbers to delete the bad bugs. Now you're always going to have good and bad. You have to have a balance. But right now, if you just have a lawn, your balance is on the negative side, right? And it's causing more harm. You're going to have to spray your fruit tree more and all this fun stuff. So by having more flowers or doing some of this, even keeping your clover, you'll have a situation where you can actually balance that out. So you have the biodiversity. The other ones will be reduced environmental impact. Okay, you won't have to water as much once it's established. You don't have to mow your lawn. You don't have to fertilize as much either. And your fertilizer will be a little bit different. Most people use a little bit more organic fertilizer, and that can be as simple as mushroom manure or something like that, even steer manure. Gaia Green has a whole bunch of different ones as well, but you can get your numbers and amounts of fertilizer that you're applying year after year lower down as well. So there's that cost savings with that as well. Probably the biggest one that everybody wants to know, and I think we might be a little bit too far gone, but you should start a little bit, and that is creating a pollinator environment, okay, for not only your bees, but the butterflies and all that. You're going to create that situation, which we're really, really lacking. So it's gone so far the other way, and there's so many diseases with honeybees, for example, that will cause other problems for us. But at least we're putting a step in the right direction of giving some pollinators. And most of the plants that you're going to use in your lawn are early blooming, okay? And if you think about it, there's not too many things in our yards anymore that are early blooming. And what happens is that the honeybees or the mason bees, well, they'll starve before they even get into the situation, because we've eradicated all the different types of flowers that we need to flower early in the season to feed them. So there again, it's a whole balancing act for sure. And if you want, the last one would probably be the look appeal. And that's a whole cultural change. The mindset's always been beautiful lawns. I had a neighbor once that mowed them both ways. I had to crisscross, everything like that. Couldn't find a weed in his place. So it's a cultural shift. I think is prettier to have that. I always go to, I've never been there, it's on my bucket list, but like Italy, like in the Tuscanies, you see all the foliage and all that in the hills. And I honestly, driving home every day now, you know, you have all the different flowers, the Amelanchiers and everything on the side of the hills. I like that look. Buttercups, all that when you're hiking in the fields. So I like that look. So to me, it looks nicer having all that different type of stuff. Now, I said the easiest start off is to do it with clover in the lawn. And clover you'll find in most of the mixes. But if you really want to start off somewhere really cool, and it doesn't take that much, and it's the biggest bang for your buck, and that is with bulbs. So your crocuses, right? Your muscari, your hyacinths, narcissus, your woodland tulips, those type. First of all, if you're trying to attract more pollinators, a single flower bulb, not the doubles, and that will attract more of the pollinators, okay? So you want a single bulb one, and you want to have it in succession. So obviously your snowdrops will be early season, and you can go all the way around to alliums, which will be planted not in your main part of your garden, because most alliums are quite tall and big. They'll be planted over kind of into your shrubbery area. Okay, but starting off with bulbs is so easy. We all kind of see it when we drive to Vancouver. You look over from the freeways, and what do you see in the little ravines, besides the blackberries and everything rambling on? You'll see some daffodils here and there, and that's just the look that we're kind of going for. So you can start off budget-wise quite easily to plant your bulbs into the lawn quite easily. So what you want to do, if you have an auger, and there again, the rule of thumb, you don't change how you plant, is that if it's a tulip, you can go 7 inches. If it's a daffodil in Kamloops, you want to go about 9 inches. So you just auger some holes. And I wouldn't do the whole thing in one shot. What you want to do with anything of this nature is actually go and pick a section of your yard or your lawn. You may not find that it's going to be your front lawn. If you're brave enough to do that with your neighbors, great. But what you can do is maybe extend your border garden and kind of pick about a half and make another border garden, but of in the lawn, and do the naturalization of bulbs in that area. I always kind of suggest that you put some bone meal after you auger. Just put a bone meal in there, mix it in with the soil, and then it's as easy as dropping in your bulb. Now remember, the rule of thumb, because you're not going to go and plant your snowdrops 7 or 9 inches, right? But the rule of thumb is you 2.5 to 3 times the diameter of the bulb. So from the root to the top point, you times that, and that's how deep it goes. So, and that allows the lawn to go around. So once they pop up and you've planted them, so this is going to be a fall project, when they come up, there's one thing you need to remember: no mow May. so that one means you don't want to mow anything in May, for whether you're doing bulbs or whether you're doing any of these type of plants. Your time to mow is usually in early April, and the mower needs to be set now higher. Okay, it's not going to be the green mowing height. You're going to have it 3 to 5 inches. Okay, no less than 3 inches. Okay, so, and as a general rule, that's what it's going to look like moving forward through all the seasons. You're going to have no more than 3 inches. Honestly, 5 to 7 would be better, okay, depending on the type of grass that you have too. What we're going to try and do is transition from the from the Kentucky Blues into more of the bunching grasses, which are the fescues, which are the fine bladed grasses. Okay, so what you want to do is you mow at that height in April, after some of your bulbs have flowered, okay? But you don't want to mow again until basically August. And for that reason, you have the foliage. So you take your tulip, take your woodland tulip, it's flowered off, and now you have the foliage. And you have your grass and your foliage of your tulip, okay? You're kind of going to have to put up with a messy situation for a little bit, okay? Because those leaves are the solar panels for feeding the root system. And the roots is where the bulb is going to store all that energy for you, okay? So you won't probably go and mow until the beginning of August, mid-August. You'll mow that down. Soon as those bulbs go and start turning color, like the leaves start turning color, so you don't have to, they've done some research on this. It used to be that they'd have to be brown before you go and dig them out or plant them again. They can just even start turning to a yellow shade. Once they turn to yellow shade, then you can go and mow your grass. And then you wouldn't mow it again until we get into autumn, just before the frost comes along. Okay, so we're talking, nowadays it seems like it's mid to end of October before we get a hard frost. But in that time range is when you'd mow it one more time. Okay, now that's not to say that, especially when you're starting out, you're going to get clumps of grass growing as well, a little bit higher. And in that situation, I would just take a light weed eater or go and take your shears. When you mow, especially if you have wildflowers sitting there, what you want to do is let it sit for a day, and then any of the seeds that are there from the wildflower will dry up and drop into the rest of your lawn. So give it a day. But then you need to go and rake up that area that you mowed and get rid of it and get it off the turf and compost it. Okay, don't leave it sitting there, because you're still going to have some wildflowers still popping up. You can create a situation where if it's too thick and there's too much thatch, let's say, you can actually create a situation where you're rotting whatever's trying to come up, or shading it way so much that it's going to rot on you anyways. Okay, so those are the timings of your of mowing, as well as how high you should mow, and then also with your wildflower, cleaning it up. Now, when you should fertilize, if you're going to fertilize, you should do it early in the season, there again in April, okay, depending. So Kamloops is so diversified. So lower bench here will be more like March, higher up in Sahalee and Aberdeen, you're going to be May. And I would go and fertilize at that time. You want something with a high middle number, a high phosphorus number, okay? So if you all look, there's 3 numbers on the bag: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. That middle number, which is a bad number for the lower mainland and for places that have a high water table, because that phosphorus is going into your water. Kamloops, we are a little bit more drought tolerant with that, so we can apply more phosphorus. That high middle number not only builds your bulbs, it builds your root system, it builds the wildflower to produce more flowers as well. Okay, so that high middle number gets you more flowers, bigger flowers, attracts, because they're bigger and more potent flowers, it attracts more pollinators into your garden as well. So it's a win-win-win all through that area. So in areas that have lots of rainfall, so if you lived out in Chase, I wouldn't fertilize in the fall for my wildflower garden. And the reason for that is there's so much moisture and water that it's, by the time the plants come out of dormancy, the most likely in areas like that, the fertilizer has passed the root zone. Okay. Whereas in the earlier season, you want to fertilize in areas like that so that the fertilizer is available to the root system and hasn't passed through. Okay. So in the lawn, like, is a different practice, because in lawn you actually go in and fertilize with a high potash number, which you still can do for wildflowers, because that potash is basically what hardens off all your plants. So if you live in a more mild climate, Chase, lower down here in Kamloops, then you could fertilize with not even so much high phosphorus, but more potash to toughen up your wildflowers and your bulbs. The key there, I don't know if anybody noticed, is I would stay away from the nitrogen as much. So lower nitrogen, if any, okay? Because now the nitrogen is what most people use for that quick green up on your lawn. That nitrogen is what grows the green of the lawn. That nitrogen is what's making you mow the grass every week. So low nitrogen, more of the others. And as funny as this sounds, one of those weeds that has always been known, no different than clover, is your dandelion. And if you had a high presence of dandelions in your lawn, they actually were breaking up that hard clay. So if you go into certain areas, when we used to do landscape maintenance, and the best one is up on the, I won't name the place, but up on the corner in Batch here, they had a ton of dandelions, and it drove the strata crazy, because we were trying to find a balance between how much we were spraying and the dandelions. And the strata was very, until the strata changed, it was very get rid of everything. So we were spraying every time we were there, right? Then the strata changed, and then, but what I'm trying to say here is dandelions are an indicator of poor soil and hard soil. So the more dandelions you have, the better it is, because those dandelions with that taproot are breaking open the hard clay. So you can put in as simple as allowing dandelions to flower, right? And be a little kid again and blow all over and have them go all over the place, so that you have more dandelions in your situation to help break up that clay. And then I can almost promise you that by the time you see fewer and fewer dandelions in your yard, the more and more you'll see your wildflower mix coming out to break that up. So dandelions aren't a bad thing. They're a good thing. And you just have to know they're indicators for them. So, and that's the reason for them. So water consumption as well. So when you first start with your seed mix, you're going to, and with anything that you're growing, you're going to have to water it. Okay. Now watering is going to be less than your lawn, obviously. Okay. But you're still going to have to maintain and water it for the first year. After that, then it's just, unless we get into a real hot spell, then you can go and water the plant or water your wildflower, your lawn area in that time period, but you don't have to apply as much water as you would have if it was just a lawn. And I will say this with a caveat, and I'm always on offside track here, but you can teach, even if you have a lawn, and a lawn that's properly maintained, that was properly put in, and will learn that it can only be watered once a week. And you can do that even on the hottest day in the middle of summer and just water it once a week. But the prep work had to be done before that lawn. If you just rolled your turf out on top of the clay soil, you're not going to be successful, and you're going to have to water. And even the amount of water that you do every day, and you're going to water and water, it still will go brown. So anything with the lawn, if you walk away here today, is that root zone. So if you have that problem, I would flip the turf. The easiest thing to do is rent a turf cutter, flip the turf, and reseed or re-turf on top of the turf. If you wanted to do best case scenario, it is you actually take that turf, throw an inch of sand on it and an inch of peat, and then rototill it in 4 or 5 inches and use your old turf as the organic matter for that turf. That root zone will then protect you, that in the hottest day you just have to water once a week. And it's a good deep watering, not a, like I still see people out there doing this, that does nothing. So good deep waterings, you should set up cups around your lawn like that to see how much water is actually getting into those cups. And that is what is the indicator of how long you should water your lawn. So that's the lawn. Now when it comes to the wildflower mixes, with adding these in, whether it be clover, whether it be, they got a whole bunch. Did I grab the wrong bags? Well, these are all clovers, but then they also, West Coast is, I have to say, they're not sponsoring me, but they are doing a really good job with this. They've really gotten into the wildflower mixes. Okay, so now if you have an established lawn and you're wanting to do all this kind of thing and seed your wildflowers, we're getting a little late now. It's getting a little warm, to be honest. If you're higher up, you probably get away with it. Or as long as you're not going to go away on holidays for 2 weeks or a month after you apply it, okay, then you can do it. But what we're going to do here when you have your existing lawn is you're going to pick an area there again. Pick an area. Don't try and do the whole area in one shot here. And regardless, you should leave probably 10 to 15% of the seed left in the bag. So just in case something doesn't germinate. But you have your existing lawn. You don't want to do the bulb thing. That doesn't really excite you. Well, I want some wildflowers. So the next thing is to go into the seeds. And with the seed, what you'll want to do, there again, do it a little bit earlier than now, or wait till fall. If you wait into the fall, if there's an annual or biannual flower mix, and they'll have some in there, they might not germinate, or they might actually die before they come up the year after. Okay, and then you're also fighting with the birds and stuff when you go and seed it. But let's say it's about a month earlier than we're doing this. Mental note that I should do this earlier. That what you want to do is actually scar up your lawn. At the very least, walk around with your golf cleats or whatever. But what you want to do is aerate it for sure, okay? And plug it and plug it and plug it, which is difficult to do, but you need to aerate it. I have two different things on thatch. Now, a lot of people, the biggest thing is to thatch it. You have to be careful in Kamloops, because if the lawn was rolled out on just turf, you'll actually find that that thatch is actually shading and protecting the root system of the lawn. And old thatch will actually, when you top dress and seed with the seed, that thatch, if it's composted enough, will actually be an area for the wildflower seed to grow in. So depending on how many times you've done a thatch or a dethatching of your lawn, that is the indicator of what you want to do. So if you year after year thatch your lawn, then in that case what I would do is thatch it again and then put a wildflower seed over top of that thatch after you've thatched it. I will say that I would use a top dressing mix and add my wildflower seed into it. Okay, and if you take, it says it's a real simple thing as, before seed tape with carrots, you'd always have a clump, right, of carrots and then nothing and then carrots, because they're such a fine seed. Well, you look at the clover seed, and the clover seed is even smaller than a carrot seed. So what I always do is I pour the clover seed into masonry sand or into a light peat mix or something like that. And by doing that, you're spreading out the seeds. You're not going to get that clump. And then after you've thatched or aerated your lawn, I would go and just take a spreader. A broadcast spreader is better than a drop spreader, but broadcast that. And what you're broadcasting is the seed as well as the coating of the seed, for a lack of a better word, with the peat moss or the sand with it. So you have it land, and then the peat moss and that land on top of the seed. The reason we have the peat moss in there is to help keep the moisture on the seed. And so that is important, not as much in early part of March and April, but very important from doing it now through the summer, okay? And it also means that you're going to have to go and not irrigate, you're going to actually have to go and mist. So if we came away from this seminar, we're like, oh, I want to try this today. What you have to do is be prepared that you're going to have to mist that area. Don't drench it. Don't pound it with the big droplets of water. Okay, what you want to do is lightly mist, kind of like when you're seeding and you mist your seed tray. You don't dump the water in it, do you? So you want to mist your lawn so that the seeds have a chance to germinate. Because actually, a big droplet from your sprinkler is actually going to deroot, for the lack of a better word, the seed. It's going to start to germinate, and then bang, a big droplet hits it and kind of blows up and then dies out. And then you're not happy with your success. So that's what you do with your existing lawn. And if you want to try the wildflower seed, you got to make sure that you either aerate the area, you have to either thatch it, something like that, unless it's old thatch, and then you can probably seed right on top of that thatch. So thatching, not a big thing for Kamloops. I'm never a fan of thatching, like I've mentioned. Thatching, so year after year, especially with the mowers that you have, if you don't have a bagger, it just gets blown out onto the ground, and then it's old grass clippings that build up year after year. And so it can get so thick that it actually harms the grass. And so you just take some fingers on your mower, and it just pulls up all the brown dead grass, and then you start again. Yeah. So, and it can get so thick. Like, I'm not totally against it, but nowadays most people have baggers, so the amount of thatch compared to even 10 years ago is minimal, right? Because they used to just mow it out and blow it out, and then most people don't want to rake it up, so they just leave it, right? So the old thatch, it can actually prevent the nutrients and the fertilizer and everything going down into the root system. So then your lawn would die out, kind of thing. So if you have thick thatch, you take a hard rake to it and just really kind of rip up your lawn a bit, so that what has to happen is that the seed, no matter what seed you use, the seed has to be in contact with the soil, okay? And so if you have thatch that actually turned into soil, that's good. If you have thatch that's thatch, you gotta furrow that and get the seed into it, okay? So there's a little bit of work for that. Like I mentioned, if you're going to go away, not the time to do it. I would do it in the fall or earlier in the spring, because your success rate of germination of some of the seed won't be that high. And I mentioned that if you're going to do it now, you're going to have to mist it. Once it's established, then it will take off on its own, and the amount of water for your lawn will be considerably less for what you need to do, okay? So most of the germination will happen in about like 7 to 14 days. So you got to be prepared for the next week to 2 weeks to that. What most happen, and it doesn't even have to be the wildflower seed. It says the same as your lawn. Most people will do it on the weekend, right? Do all this work and seed their lawn, and then they go to work on the Monday to Friday, and guess what? Your kids don't come home like you asked them in the water. They forget, and then, right? It will just start to germinate, and then it will dry out. So that's why you have to probably do it twice. If it gets warmer than this, like 3 times a day, like morning, midday, and evening. So that's with the wildflower seed. And then if you really want to get excited, there's a whole bunch of different plants that you can go and use. And now this is a totally different look, okay? Because this will be more of a mounding situation, okay? It's not going to be flat. You're not going to have a flat yard or flat lawn with flowers coming out from that flatness, if that makes any sense. All of these, you're going to have clumps. So if you have no ankles like me and you're trying to walk through this type of situation, you're going to be doing a little bit of this, right, as you go. Because especially when we get into the fescues and that, they're all clumping. If you look at some of the moss and that, it's a clump, right? And then it spreads out. So the main parent plant, the center of the plant, will be mounded. Almost all the plants that you look at will be mounded in the middle. It's interesting to note that you can walk on all these, and the plants do actually better when you walk on them, because a lot of them need that compaction because their roots go out laterally. And if you want them to actually go out laterally, you need to walk on them more. So now you all have different heights and sizes. Like you take the thyme, for example, and we're trying to get woolly thyme in. This is elephant thyme, but so my mom in her old yard had this planted in between all the rocks, okay, as you walk through the path. So you have the path, and then you had the thyme, so you're stepping actually on the rock. But thyme is, and the woolly thyme is probably the most common one that people would start off with when you're trying to get a lawn like this. And then the other ones for shadier areas, you'll have like the moss, different types of moss. Now you have the two types, you have a little bit more golden and the green, okay, the Irish moss. And we can go all the way into the drought tolerant areas where you're going to get and use different types of sedum, okay? So you can really play with the flowers as a lawn, depending on, and you can mix it up too, knowing your yard. Okay, if it's underneath a great big old tree, right, you can go into more violas and things. If it's out in the full sun and right out cooking, 12 hours a day in the middle of summer, then I would really suggest that you go to the sedums. Okay, that still can be walked on, right? But no, you don't have to water these as much as you would of these. This one's coral carpet, but there's so many different sedums available, from ones that are like the carpet, like they say, but to like even hens and chicks, right? That you can go. You can't walk on them as easily, obviously. That one you can. And once they get established, like you almost can forget about them, right? They don't take very much moisture. They'll hold the moisture coming through the fall, the little bit that we had, and go all the way through. So these are definitely, you can go from, more moisture, more shade, right? And then, people really like the creeping Jenny. And they'll even use it in the hanging baskets and that, right? But at least it gives you a different color and texture. So the key here is, there again, biodiversity. So you can have a lot of fun with it, more than my expertise will be, but you can have the color palettes and such, right? I like Abrutia, right? So you look at the front edge on the right-hand side in the parking lot, we have all the different Abrutia and that snow in summer and stuff. So it looks really nice. So imagine that. So some of those you can't walk on as much, right? You're going to have to, and what I would do is, and I'm just pointing at this, but you could use this. And so ones that are lower and matted that you can walk on, like the thyme. So I would make my pathway out of thyme, right? And then on the sides, then go and put different abricias or moss or whatever it may be on the outside. So you still have a path and access. Now, what you should remember and think about is that if you have a flower garden on the outside of your lawn, which most people do, right? And the lawn's in the center. What I would do and suggest is that you keep a strip and just either use thyme or sedums, whatever you want to use, but you need a strip along that border so that you can walk and access your flowering shrub area. And then maybe one or two kind of in the middle to get through everything, and then have the mounting higher plants in the other areas. It's real easy to do. It can be as complicated or as easy as you want it to be. It can be as just starting off with clover, adding a few bulbs to naturalize and carry on. And I have to say, bulbs, and it's obviously fall bulbs that we're talking about, but bulbs in general give you the biggest bang for your buck, because guess what? They multiply, right? So in a number of years, you'll have, as an investment compared to some of this stuff, you'll have more flowers coming up than if you did this. Okay, so yeah, it can be as simple as hard. Eco-friendly. You will save money in the long run with the fuel, right? You're going to save money on watering. Okay, the biodiversity, which is what nature is starving for right now, for sure, especially in the city limits, we're lacking that. And the pollinators, we need to bring them back for not just even this, but for our whole garden and for the benefit of our fruiting, our vegetable gardens, everything like that.